In the case of People versus Conrad Robert Murray, Dr. Murray is present in court with his counsel, Mr. Chernoff, Mr. Flanagan, Mr. Gorgian, and Mr. Pena. The people by their counsel, Mr. Walgren and Ms. Brazil. Dr. Shafer is again on the witness stand. All jurors and all alternates are present. To everybody, good morning. To jurors, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, thank you for your continued promptness and patience. Dr. Shafer, good morning. Sir.
Good morning, Your Honor.
Do you acknowledge, sir, you are still under oath and still sworn to tell the truth?
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you. This is a resumption of cross-examination by the defense. Mr. Chernoff, good morning.
Good morning, Judge.
Thank you.
Good morning, Dr. Shafer.
Good morning, Mr. Chernoff.
When we last spoke, we were talking about rapid bolus, I believe. I wanted to ask you some questions. You had mentioned that one of the dangers of a rapid bolus was apnea.
That is
one
correct.
Of the dangers. And in fact, in this FDA insert, which is marked as People's 212, and I realize I don't have the whole thing on here, all throughout, and by the way, this insert is an FDA insert, so all manufacturers of propofol would have the same information. Is that right?
With the exception of the sulfite warning on some, that is correct.
We have.
Mr. Chernoff, could you do me a favor, because sometimes we have some audio problems. If you could get a little closer to the mic on the podium, that would help out.
Okay,
Thank you.
Judge, thank you.
Thank you.
Manufacturers of propofol include Hospira, AstraZeneca. Do they still make it?
Hospira makes it. AstraZeneca sold their product to a company called APP Pharma, and they now make what used to be the AstraZeneca product.
And then Teva used to make it, right? Do they don't make it anymore? Or
Teva had manufacturing problems. They were shut down by the FDA, is my recollection, and I'm not sure if they're making it or not right now.
All right, let me mark this as Defense FF. The only difference between this Triple F, Judge. The only difference between this insert, I believe, Doctor, is that it's just larger print. But I'm going to show it to you. Throughout this insert, there are notations that are made that talks about problems, and I realize this is not. Let me see what I can do here. Am I doing something wrong here, Judge? All right, we'll talk about undesirable side effects here, such as cardiorespiratory depression, are likely to occur from bolus dosing or rapid increases in infusion rates. It warns of that in this insert. Is that right?
Yes.
And as we go down here, it further warns that slow infusion or slow injection techniques are preferable over rapid bolus administration, right?
Yes.
And I'm going to skip a bunch of it, but bottom line is bear with me, Doctor. When discussing initiation of max sedation, it recommends slow infusion or slow injection techniques are recommended to avoid apnea or hypotension. Is that right?
Yes.
And when you were talking about why that was important, that's all the reasons that were listed in this insert are why it's important to avoid a rapid initiation of this particular drug. Is that right?
Yes.
Can you hear me okay, Judge?
No.
All right, let me
I'd
scoot
appreciate
over.
it. I know it may be a little bit distracting, but I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
The simulation that you prepared to 25 milligram simulation that you prepared. I'm marking as GGG, Judge.
Triple golf.
You noted what am I doing wrong here? What's going on? Can't seem to get this. I'm not sure what's wrong with this thing here. Maybe the deputy can help me. I can't seem to get this thing lower.
You just want it centered?
No, that's not it. It's just not. It's not shrinking like it did on Friday.
Well, Deputy Jones will assist if he would. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Jones. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is a simulation that you prepared, right?
Yes.
This is a 25 milligram simulation. And you already testified that this simulates a rapid bolus,
Yes.
immediate bolus. You also prepared, can I have the 50 milligram, please? You also prepared a 50 milligram simulation, which you showed to the jury as well. You remember that?
Yes.
I'm going to mark that as HHH.
Triple hotel.
There's two of them. There's one that's
Let me show you defense HHH. This is the 50 milligram that you prepared, right?
Yes.
And once again, it shows the immediate, initial rapid bolus initiation.
Yes.
Now, during your conversation with the jury, you said that you would expect to see an apnea under these circumstances. Is that right?
Yes.
Do you have your pointer, Dr. Shafer?
Here.
Okay. Can you show us at what point, I'm going to use this 50 milligrams, and then I'm going to go back to the 25, but I'd like you to show us at what point you would expect to see that apnea event.
Within the first 1 to 2 minutes, right in here.
Upon initiation, would be fair to say?
Yes, once the drug is into the brain, yes.
Mr. Chernoff, if you want, you can adjust the podium so that you don't have to move from your location, but we can hear you at the same time.
Like this?
Maybe
okay.
better.
Great. And let me show you the 25 milligrams. And by the way, for the record, you're pointing to about anywhere from between 0 and 2 minutes on this graph on the x-axis. Is that right?
Well, let's say 1 to 2.
Okay. And let me show you GGG, which is the 25 milligrams. And could you show us where you would expect to see this apnea event?
In the area of 2 minutes.
So
1 to 2 again.
So once again, pretty much upon initiation.
Yes.
And that's actually the experience that most anesthesiologists have, is that upon initiation of this anesthetic, apnea is a real danger, is a real possibility.
Yes.
I'm going to show you once again EEE. This is the simulation that you did for us, and once again, thank you for that.
Glad to.
And you did this a few days before you first started testifying for Dr. White. He asked you to do this. Is that right?
Yes.
And you used the same computer program that you had used for these other simulations.
An Excel spreadsheet, yes.
A spreadsheet. Okay. Now, in this particular circumstance, you did leave off the apnea threshold, but can we assume that the apnea threshold still begins at about 1.3?
1.3 to 3.3, yes.
All right. And based on this particular simulation, can you show us where you would expect an apnea event?
In a patient who had had no other medications, the risk would be here. But it would be a low risk because in the absence of other medications, the apnea threshold, it remains below the apnea threshold.
Here being?
My apologies, Your Honor. Here being around 4 to 5 minutes.
So the apnea threshold, and I believe you testified last week that it's the brain that matters, right?
Correct.
And now the brain the apnea threshold, the brain curve that we have here, which is the dark red curve, right? The solid
The
red
effect
curve
site curve is the dark red curve, yes.
is below the apnea threshold.
Correct.
So you would not expect apnea to occur under these circumstances.
In the absence of other medications, no.
All right. And we're going to get to that, I promise. Now, when you prepared, I'm going to go back to this 50 milligram, which is Defense HHH. When you prepared this, did you have some information, some evidence from the scene, some hypothesis about use of 50 milligrams, or you just choose that to demonstrate something?
I had evidence from Dr. Murray's interview.
Okay. And can you be more specific about that?
Dr. Murray talked about mixing lidocaine with propofol 1-to-1. And so there was a 10 cc, 10 milliliter syringe. So this would represent a 10 milliliter syringe that was half filled with propofol and half filled with lidocaine.
And so you hypothesized the possibility of the entire 10 cc syringe being pushed in.
That is correct.
Okay. And that would include 50 cc's of lidocaine, 50 of propofol.
Correct.
And in this particular scenario, it wouldn't have been the 3 to 5 minutes that Dr. Murray said. It would have been immediate push.
That's how the simulation was done.
Right. Now, in this particular simulation, let's assume, let's go back to what Dr. Murray. Let's stay with this particular scenario. Now, Dr. Murray did not tell the police that he injected 50 milligrams. Is that right?
I would have to refer back to the... Oh, in terms of that day, that is correct.
Okay.
That is correct.
Okay. Now, if, in fact, Dr. Murray had pushed in rapidly this 50 milligrams, then you would expect, as you've testified, any apnea event to occur within those 2 minutes.
My only hesitation in saying yes, generally I would say yes, is that the pharmacological state of Michael Jackson is so unclear to me because of the long history of drugs that he's received, getting propofol every night. In a patient who was pharmacologically naive, absolutely I would expect apnea. In Mr. Jackson's case, it's harder to have that level of certainty because there's very little, almost no precedent for this amount of propofol exposure. But for the purposes of your question, sir, yes.
Okay. And Dr. Murray would have been, of course, there during that period of time under your hypothetical.
Yes.
To observe this apnea event.
Yes.
In this particular defense exhibit EEE, even assuming the unlikely event of apnea, which you've already testified would be unlikely and you wouldn't expect.
In the absence of other drugs, that's
Right.
correct.
For 5 minutes, this would be infused under your scenario here, and Dr. Murray, of course, would be present during that period of time. Right?
Yes.
Apnea event that would occur would either occur, it would have to occur at some point while propofol was actually in Michael Jackson's system. Is that right?
I don't understand the question.
Let me re-ask. Let me go back and re-ask it. Under Dr. Murray's, under the analysis you did of what Dr. Murray gave Michael Jackson here, at what point would this propofol no longer be any danger whatsoever?
Certainly by 10 minutes, the levels have dropped to the point that there should not be a risk of further complication. The risk period is around 5 to 6 minutes when the levels of propofol in the brain are at their highest levels.
And we see actually in your in the graph that you did. All right, let me see what I can do here.